So we heard a lot today about different kinds of food programs and hunger and what people are hungry for. And in fact, people aren't supposed to know what you're talking about, but I think the last few speakers stole some of my material, so if it sounds familiar. But I'd like to talk to you today about a different kind of hunger. A hunger that is really deep. It's the transcendent hunger. We have company. The thirst for the infinite, the deep aching desire within inside of us to become who we hope we can become. That, as we're little kids, we say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have lots of ideas, and that can certainly change throughout your life. So it's not just about having that desire, but what do you do with it? And how do you manage it? How do you navigate through your life so that you go in the direction that you want to go in? So that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I want to give you some food for thought. I want you to think about the moments in your life where things have turned around or changed for you, or knocked you on the head maybe, or ripped you open and made you raw and vulnerable, and yet gave you the strength somehow to move on. Because I would like to propose that those moments, those aha moments, if you will, are the moments that feed us deeply and are the meals that we need in order to move forward in our lives, to become all that we're supposed to be, and also to be who we can be to somebody else at any given moment in time. So when I said I would talk about all the hungers, it was a little overwhelming to say, well, you could be hungry for an education, you could be hungry for a relationship, you could be hungry for jobs, and how do you feed all of those? And there's one way that we can do that, and that is simply by paying attention to those moments that call us. You know, it's like I said today, the movie Noah opened up, and it was quite appropriate because we had the floods outside. But, but when I hear that, I can't help but think about Bill Cosby, Noah. And those moments, maybe it's not quite that loud for you, or they don't come right out and say your name, but it's those moments that spin you around and throw you into a whole different trajectory than the one that you were on. And you may not know why. The other thing is we never get a handbook to tell us what to do now, what to do next, and how do we get to where we want to go. So how do we feed those? Again, by paying attention. And if we don't pay attention, what happens? You miss that moment of opportunity. That moment where if you had gotten your paper in on time, maybe you would have gotten an A and then the scholarship and the such and such and such and such. So I'd like to tell you a few stories today about how those moments in my life have fed me and given me direction, so that hopefully it gives you something to think about in your own lives. So there may be a point in time where you're trying to make a decision about something, or you have a child that's trying to make a decision about something, and you can be of some assistance to them. So the first story I'd like to tell you about is, since there's a lot of college students in here as well, I'll go back that far, which for me is way, way back. But it's, I was trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I was already a mother with 2 children, a single mom, and I was suddenly one day opening the window in my bedroom, and I lived out the Jersey Shore. It was swollen and damp, so the wood was swollen. I went to open it up, and bam, my back goes out, and I feel this excruciating pain, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to move. So a friend of mine comes over, takes me to her chiropractor, who says, gee, Pat, you already know so much about the body, because I had taken the bodywork training in anatomy and physiology, and he said, why don't you become a chiropractor? I was like, yeah, right. No way, 4 more years of school at my age? No, not happening. There was a moment that I could have let go and not pay attention to. Or what else do we do with those moments? We argue with them, right? You say, oh no, I'm not doing that. And you walk away and you don't pay attention to the lesson that you're being given, or the gift. I actually perceive these as gifts. So this particular gift, I looked at in a different way. I looked back 3 years and said, well, what were you doing 3 years ago? And it was the same thing I was doing then, and it seemed like yesterday. So I looked ahead 3 years and saw that in 3 years I'll be a doctor, I'll be done, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So that was it. That was my decision. I moved forward. I became a chiropractor, opened my practice, did what we all do when we start a business, did research and marketing my community and doing things. And about 3 years later, I feel this deep ache in there again, this churning in my stomach, and say, what now? And I'm sure some of you who are in college are thinking the same thing. Should I go on to grad school? Should I start a new business? For those of you that are out there and starting over in different professions or careers. And so I'm in New York. I'm in a Pilates training, actually, at the time, and decide to go to a movie at night for some relaxation. So a colleague and I get on the train, heading towards the subway, heading towards the movie theater. And we're sitting there, and the next thing you know, these two guys come running through our car, waving guns. And one yells at the other, I told you not to shoot him, you mother blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? At that point, the train stopped. Police came running in, chasing them out of our car, which was my cue to get out of there. We go upstairs and get into a taxi cab. We go into the cab, and we're sitting there talking about what just happened. One of those moments where you think you're out for fun, and bam, your life could be ended in a second. So we head over to this movie theater, because the taxi driver says, you guys better get out and walk, because we're stuck in gridlock and you're not going anywhere. And I was like, what? First we almost get shot, and now we have to get stuck in gridlock. So, we go to the movie theater. The next movie that was showing, the only one left, was something called Entertaining Angels. So, here I am in New York, that can mean almost anything. And so I said, is it gross? Is it really bad? And the guy goes, no, it's fine. I said, good. So I go in, we sit down, had no idea what I was going to be watching, didn't know any of the actors or actresses. And the movie starts, and this comes up. This quote by Dorothy Day. I wanted the abundant life. I had no idea how I was going to find it. So this was a period of time in my life that was actually happening. I didn't know what was next. What was the next thing in my life? So I thought, wow, that's a coincidence. Here this is. But even more so was the fact that Dorothy Day had started soup kitchens in New York back in the late 20s, early 30s during the Depression, and also had been an atheist and communist and decided that she was going to become Catholic and started the Catholic Worker. So this was also a time in my life that I was a recovering Catholic and didn't really see the significance in it, but decided that I'd listened to her story and I wanted to learn more about her. Well, here goes one of those moments again. We're sitting there in the middle of this movie theater, and right in the middle of the movie, something happens inside of me that rips me open, and I start weeping. Not just but a kind of gut-wrenching weeping. Tears running down my face. I had no idea what hit me. There wasn't anything in the movie that set it off. I had no idea. But when we left that movie that night, and my friend asked if you want to take the subway or a cab, I said, no, definitely, let's do it the cab. So we get in the cab, and I said, you know what? I know, I got my answer, what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be feeding people. But I didn't have the impulse to go open a pizza shop or anything. It was more like I knew that my practice was going to be feeding people on many different levels. So again, no handbook. They don't give you any handbooks with these things. So I go home, back in my practice, and I'm doing what I did every day. And suddenly, some of my patients asked, who were very stressed out, mostly teachers in the Philadelphia School District, if I could teach meditation. So I said, sure, I'd love to. I had been studying with a woman in New York City called Hilda Charlton, who used to tell us to go and volunteer at Dorothy Day's Soup Kitchen. So all these little threads, or as one of the other speakers said, a web was being created. And in fact, we called the meditation group the Web of Light. And people came. I started the first class the first night, and I said, well, if nobody shows up, I don't have to do it. 16 people showed up. And for 8 years, we never had less than that. Every week, every Thursday night, there was no charge. But we became family. We became a community. And we fed each other on many levels. So if people were trying to decide what's next in their life, if they needed a job, if they had an illness, as a group, we would all support them. And through that, we witnessed miracles. We witnessed transformations of people that had been coming for years. So when I was doing the meditation group, that progressed into something else after a number of years. People asked for more. They wanted more again. How many of you have little kids that want candy all the time? What do they say? I want more. I want more. So there we were. I had more. And the only other thing I had to offer them was training for body work and massage therapy. So I started a school. And the first 8 people that signed up really wanted to become massage therapists. And I saw it as, single mothers, they want to do massage. It's a great career for people. Sounds good. I'd love to do it. Well, that was the first 8 people. The next 8 years of people that came signed up for the course because they witnessed the transformation that the first 8 people went through because of how they were being fed each other. They were feeding each other through personal touch, through education, through commitment to coming into a program and finishing it. Again, that went on for a few years. And then as part of my meditation group, often I would invite a guest speaker. So I had, our group was a non-denominational group, mostly Judeo-Christian, but we also invited people who were Hindus and Muslims and American Indians and a number of different types of religious backgrounds to come in and to talk, share their thoughts. So I had a Hindu teacher from India come, and she sat and taught at my house and gave some classes. And a few weeks later, I had a Sufi master from Jerusalem who taught at the Alaska Mosque. And he came, and I sent out notices to the community to say that he was coming, and if anybody was interested, they could come and listen to him. And when he came, there was a void before he got there. A number of people were showing up, the guests, and all different groups. We had a Hindu group come and who did meditation in the community. We had my meditation group. We had a group of Muslims that were coming to hear him specifically. And they were all asked to bring something to put on the table for dinner. So I had this long dining room table, and everybody came and brought some food and put it on the table. At one point, another one of those moments happens. I'm about to walk through the living room into the dining room into the kitchen, and something stops me dead in my tracks. And I turn around and look at the dining room table, and this little voice, which was not as loud as Noah, came in and said, "Pay attention to what's happening here." Here we are in this house in Erdenheim, Pennsylvania, which means, translated, home of the earth. And there are people of all religions and all cultures, and they all brought food to put on the table. We didn't separate the Jewish food from the Muslim food. Everything just went through in one place, on one table. And people all came in and took from that table and ate and conversed. And when the teacher came, we all sat in the den and we listened to him. And we all asked questions. And we discussed politics and religion and love and partners. And you name it, anything was on the table that day. Anybody could ask anything. And at the end of the day, I realized, with that little voice reminding me what had just taken place, that in this one place in Erdenheim, Pennsylvania, the home of the earth, a little bit of world peace was just created. That we, in fact, were able to feed each other on all levels, the physical level, the mental level, the emotional level, the spiritual level, and the social level. We were all able to feed each other by coming together with one purpose, and that is to have an open mind, an open heart, and an open expression of who we truly are. Our desire for world peace was united. We didn't allow anything to come in the way of what we were there for. And as I was asked to do a TED Talk here, I looked up TED, and their statement of purpose is sharing of ideas that might change attitudes, lives, and who knows, maybe even the world. And I thought, wow, that's right in line with the story that I have about the people who are coming to my house and having that. So as I tell you my stories about how those aha moments led me in different directions, there's no way I could have looked back at that movie theater in New York that night and said, this is the night that's going to change my life. It's going to spin me around, rip me open, and start something new. But I'm telling you, if you pay attention to what you have and what's given to you through yourself, through your own efforts, or through your neighbor, someone looks at you, that may be the food that you need to get you through and feed you deeply so that eventually we can have world peace. And if you aren't sure of how you're going to do that, you don't have a handbook. Like I said, they don't give us any handbooks. It's just like when you have a baby, you know, they never send you home with a handbook. You're on your own. Well, you're on your own with this too in some way, but you have to be assured that there is guidance that we get, whether it's your own intuition, whether you want to call it spirit or God, or the universal knowledge, whatever it is that you want to call it, it's there for us at all times. And if you pay attention, you will be fed deeply. As deep as some of these other speakers were talking about, going deep in the movie, going deep into conversation, going deep inside yourself to find who you really are, and above all else, when you get that, to be willing to share it with others. Mother Teresa said, if you can't feed 100 people, then just feed one. So I would like to propose that this food for thought, that, like on the airlines, feed yourself first. Find who you really are. Go deep within inside yourself. Find that essence that you want to bring forward into the world. Take action on the action steps necessary to fulfill that vision or that guidance that you get. And then, third of all, tell your story. Maybe on a TED Talk, maybe in the classroom, maybe on a train. But tell your story, because in that, you could be feeding somebody else. And if you feed somebody else, even one other person, or a classroom of people, or a congregation in your church, or buddies down at the beach, you're going to be feeding the world. And if we can all do that, we can have world peace. Thank you.